Hi there, everyone. Good evening. My name is Dr. Rashmi Jain. I am a general pediatrician here in Irvine, and I am excited to be here this evening talking to you guys. I have recently started my concierge pediatrics practice here in Irvine, and it's just really exciting to get to start those relationships with all these young families and people that may have been around here like me for many, many years, but I was gone for a few years and managed to come back to Orange County. So really excited after having graduated from Chalk to reconnect with all these colleagues and friends of mine here in Orange County. So I'm here tonight to talk to you a little bit about infant and toddler nutrition. And that just is something that I think is on our mind all the time. We just have so many questions about it. So I'm excited to be able to share what pediatricians think about infant and toddler nutrition. So what is the importance of nutrition, right? Why is it important in this period of time for infants and toddlers? First of all, it's a time of high nutrient needs. So if you think about it, at this time in their life, during infancy, their nutrient requirements per pound of body weight are higher than any other time in their life cycle. So this little itty bitty body needs a whole bunch of nutrition to do a lot of things. And so at this point in time of their life, they really may need to make sure that what they get and what they are ingesting is sufficient for what they need. The second reason is the lifelong influence. So when we think about the exposures that children have in the first 2 years of life to different types of nutrients, different types of foods, that actually happens to influence what they think about food for the rest of their life, their exposures, their eating habits, their patterns, their health overall. And then rapid growth and development. So this time of their life, 0 to 2, they are not only needing food for energy and activity, they need it to grow and develop because it is one of the most important times in their growth and development. It's one of the times they're growing the fastest in their life. So just so you have a reference for what that means, how fast do infants develop? Boys are actually half their adult height by 2 years of age. If you can think about that, that means I can double your son's height at 2, and that's how tall they're going to be when they're all grown up. That's how fast they grow in the first 2 years. A baby triples their birth weight by a year of age, and the human brain is actually 75% of its adult size by a year of age. So if you think about it, after 1 year of age, there's only 25% more to go before their brain is fully matured to the right size. So that's how much growth and development is happening in those first couple years. So then, sometimes parents wonder, do my babies know how much to eat? Do I have to force them to eat? Should I chase them with that bottle? Do I really have to wake them up to eat? So the interesting thing is babies actually can regulate their calorie intake from the day they're born. So a lot of times when they're breastfeeding and they want to stop, that's because they're actually regulating how much they need for that growth, for that development, for the energy, and for the activities they're doing. And so it's kind of bizarre to think about it, but they really can. They know how. And they will give you cues for whether they're hungry or whether they're full. So things we think about when a baby roots, right? We think of them rooting when they're hungry. We think of them kind of opening their eyes, looking around, looking for their food, their bottle or the breast. We think about them clenching their fists like they're hungry, they're crying. I mean, if they're full, what do? They close their eyes, they go to sleep, they're passed out. For the life of you couldn't get a bottle into their mouth or get them latched on your breast if you tried because they're full. That's how babies are. Older kids, toddlers, they tend to show you whether they're hungry or full by getting excited about food. They're pointing to things, they're looking at things, they're getting excited when a spoon comes towards them. Or alternatively, they're off, they're playing, they're gone. And they could care less about whether you're trying to chase them with that spoon or not. So babies can regulate how much they eat. And I think as parents, it's important to remember that we have to watch their cues for if they're hungry or if they're full. Now, on that note, a lot of times we'll tell our parents, and you guys would have heard this, in that first month of life, we're going to encourage you to wake the baby up to feed. You need to feed them every 2 to 3 hours. Why? Because in that first month, they're still learning, right? They are learning to live. They're learning life. They're learning how their body works. So yes, in the first 4 to 6 weeks, we do want you to feed on demand if they're hungry, but also wake them up if they're missing those cues. But as they get older, you'll be able to depend upon those cues quite easily. So what happens next? We bring our baby home from the hospital, right? What are we going to do? We're going to feed them. What are we going to feed them? We're going to feed them breast milk. We're going to feed them formula. What are our recommendations? So a lot of times, by the time mommies and daddies get to the pediatrician, they've already had a lot of information about this. They've already thought about it. They've already talked to their friends. They've already been on a lot of mommy groups, and they've heard that the only thing they should do is breastfeed. Is that right? Is breast milk the only thing that babies should drink? So what are our recommendations, right? Recommendations are, if you can, we would love for you to exclusively breastfeed till 6 months of age. After that, between 6 and 12 months of age, we want you to continue breastfeeding, and in that time also introduce solid foods. And after a year of age, we talk about winding down the breast milk and making food the primary source of nutrition. But is that the only thing out there? What happens if your baby can't breastfeed? What happens if you don't produce enough milk? What happens if the baby is colicky or intolerant of a protein? Is formula just as good? Absolutely. Formula is there because we need it. These formula companies have worked long and hard to make sure that they can duplicate the nutrient components of breast milk. And they are just as good. They are iron fortified, they have vitamin D, they are easily digested, maybe not as easily digested as breast milk, but they are easy for children. And with formulas also, we have the ability to deviate a little bit, right? So if your baby is lactose intolerant, you guys might remember there's formulas out there that have less lactose, like the Similac Sensitive or the Enfamil Gentles, or if they can't tolerate those proteins at all, there's broken down proteins in Alimentum or Nutramigen. These are names you may have heard of, or names you may have seen in the formula aisle, or something that your pediatrician has talked to you about. But what is it about breast milk? What is it about breast milk that makes it a little bit maybe better than formula? So if you think about breast milk, it actually is largely nutrient based. There's very little waste product in breast milk. A lot of it is absorbed right through the gut, and there's very little that comes out afterwards. So you'll notice that babies' poops after they've had breast milk are just little squirts of yellow mustardy liquid. When they have formula, they may have thicker components to their poop. Their poop is a little bit like wet mud, so it feels a little thicker. And that's just because there's more stuff that's getting disposed of after they've taken the nutrition. The other thing that we all hear about is, and it's true, that breast milk has antibodies. So when a baby is breastfeeding, the antibodies that mama's made to different antigens, let's say there's a cold going through the house, and let's say, mama's fighting that cold. Well, the antibodies that she's making are coming through her breast milk into the baby's mouth, and then the baby is getting passive antibodies or protection. So we do tend to see that babies who are breastfed will have less ear infections. They'll have less wheezing episodes. They may have less vomiting, diarrhea, or gastrointestinal episodes. So that is one benefit. It's not to say that babies with formula are the only ones who get sick and babies with breast milk never get sick. That's not the truth, but there is a protective effect of that. So that's just one thing to remember. But nutrition is the key, right? So can you do both? Absolutely. What if you only make enough breast milk for the baby to get through 30% of their feeds? That's totally fine. Can you do the remainder with formula? Yes, you can. What if you do breast milk for a few months and you have to go back to work and your production goes down? Can you switch to formula? Yes, you can. So you can go back and forth. Our goal, remember, as parents, is to give our child nutrition. We want to make sure they have what they need to grow and develop during this period of rapid growth and development. So that's the thing to remember, is that from 0 to 6, we're doing breast milk or formula. In the first month of life, we're waking them up to go every 2 to 3 hours. Hopefully by 2 months, they're giving you that 4-hour stretch at night, but still going 2 to 3, 2 to 3, 2 to 3 during the day. And hopefully by 6 months, they're going 10 hours at night and still wanting to feed a lot during the day. But I think that's the important thing to remember is 0 to 6, all of our nutrition comes from breast milk or formula and nothing else. Some pointers. So even if we are breastfeeding or exclusively breastfeeding, a lot of times we're pumping. We have pumped breast milk or we're mixing formula. So just a few things on, though it's part of nutrition, it's a lot of questions that come up with my mommies in my practice. So with pumped breast milk, how long is that breast milk good for? So once you pump breast milk, it's good on the countertop for 4 hours. It's good in your fridge for 4 days. And if you put it in your freezer, they say 6 to 12 months. I like 3 to 6 months because that freezer opens, the temperature changes sometimes if the freezer's open for a few extra minutes. You never want to put the milk on the side of the door that opens and is exposed to the air all the time. You always want to kind of pack them in little packets of 2 to 4 ounces and kind of stick them to the back of the freezer so that they remain temperature safe or temperature stable. But if you have like a sub-zero freezer in the garage that can stay closed all the time and doesn't really see temperature changes, you can go 6 to 12 months in those freezers. So that's the guideline on pumped breast milk as far as how good it is when you pump it. Now, what if you have previously frozen milk, you've frozen this now, it's 4 months out, you're finally gonna thaw it, and how do you thaw it? So one, you can either take those little baggies, put them in the fridge, let it get to a liquid form, and from there, when it finally liquefies, you have 24 hours to use that previously frozen milk. Well, let's say you need it now. You take a bowl of lukewarm water or run it under a hot tap, but to get it to the temperature, you need to thaw it out. Once it's liquefied again, you have 24 hours to use it. Once pumped breast milk is thawed, after it's been frozen and thawed, we don't refreeze it. So that's our 24 hours to use it. And now you have your little bottle. You've put in your 2 to 3 ounces, which is what the baby's usually feeding initially. And the baby leaves you a little bit, 15 mLs. How long do you have to use that? With breast milk, you have 2 hours. 2 hours to finish that bottle. So if the baby wants to take a break, burps a little bit, does a diaper change, falls asleep for 15 minutes, can you finish that bottle? Yes, yes you can. What about formula? So formula, right? There's ready to feed, there's powder. Usually we'll come home from the hospital and you'll start with ready to feed, right? It's liquid, it's easy, it's kind of adjustable. You can pour out how much ever you need if the baby isn't taking full bottles. Eventually though, we're gonna probably transition to powder. You've got to go places, you've got things to do, it's cheaper. It's right now, these days, it almost seems like it's more available than the ready to feed formulas. So how do you mix powder formulas? So you do follow the instructions on the back. It's 1 scoop to 2 ounces, but we often will recommend that you use a safe one. We always recommend you use a safe water, right? Either the distilled water, the nursery water has a little bit of fluoride in it, or alternatively, you boil water. So why is that important? There's still a lot of minerals in water. There's still the potential with tap water to actually have bacteria and viruses and different things in there that could be infectious to the baby, though it's filtered, and all of those things are gone. Our body tends to fight those agents much better because we're grown up. Our immune system is much stronger than an itty bitty baby's. But that being said, if you are going to boil the water, and we do recommend this, especially if the babies are premature, or if they have a vulnerable immune system for some reason, they have an underlying medical issue, or they were itty bitty when they were born, even if they weren't premature. We recommend you use either that distilled water, nursery water, or you boil the water. So you boil it, and then you cool it. You cool it down to like 160 degrees Fahrenheit, which you're like, oh my gosh, how do I even know if I don't have a thermometer telling me it's 70 degrees Celsius or 160 degrees Fahrenheit? You give it about a half an hour. So you boil it, you cool it for about half an hour, you go ahead and mix your powder in, you seal it, and then immediately you cool it underneath a cool water tap. You put it in a little bowl of ice water, and you get it down to the temperature you want to feed the baby. Doing that will make sure that there's no risk of bacteria or any type of contamination, if you will, in that powder. So though it's not an issue, powder is very safe and we use it all the time. It's not sterile. Ready to feed liquid is sterile. There's absolutely no concern of contaminant in there, but sometimes there's a concern for that very rare occasion of contaminant in powder. And how warm should that powder or should that formula be? So if a baby is going back and forth, right? They're breastfeeding, they're waddle feeding, they're used to getting milk at 98.6 degrees. That's your body temperature. So when you go ahead and you cool that formula down from the hot water down to the temperature you want, you're dropping a couple drops on your soft part of your hand or on the inside of your wrist to check the temperature. It should feel ambient to your skin. It shouldn't feel hot here. It shouldn't feel cold. And that is what the temperature should be. And then once you mix it, let's say you mix 12 ounces, 14 ounces, you mix a lot of formula. You don't want to use it all right now, but it was easier to do that whole boil cool thing all at once. How long is it good for? In the fridge, it's good for 24 hours. So you've mixed a batch, you can pour it out, go from there. And then again in the bottle, once the baby's fed it and has a little bit left, you have an hour to finish that. So that's the whole thing about formula. But heating the baby's bottle, so whether it's cold, refrigerated, pumped milk, or formula milk, remember we never put the bottle in the microwave. It denatures those proteins. It can create hot spots that can burn the baby. And then we also want to make sure that you're bringing it up to an ambient temperature so it doesn't denature those proteins. So how do you do that? You either run it under a hot water tap, or you will warm up some water in a shallow pot, put your bottle in there, sealed bottle, and let it come to the temperature. And it's not on the stovetop anymore. So you've warmed that water up on the stovetop, you take that off the stovetop, it's just hot water now. You're sticking the bottle in there, letting it come to the temperature that you want. And so we can break for a question real quick.
Yes, this is relevant.
Okay, relevant question. How can I make sure my breast milk is good after defrosting? My frozen breast milk has a strong taste after defrosting. It tasted normal before freezing. Well, way to go, Mama. You obviously tasted the milk before you froze it. So that's awesome. So generally, if you stored it, let's say you knew you were going to freeze your breast milk and you pumped it, you stored it within those 4 hours. You didn't put it in the fridge for 4 days and then at the end decide to go to the freezer. You're probably going to be fine if you're using your milk between 3 and 6 months, as long as your freezer stays at 0 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, which it always does. So, the reality is it's that time-based. It is going to taste different. Remember, everything is going to kind of separate in that freezer. The fats are going to separate from the carbohydrates. It's going to taste a little bit different to you because it's going to have separated. But that doesn't mean it's bad. So when you say there's a strong taste after defrosting, chances are that you're just tasting either the protein part of it or you're tasting just the fat part of it, but you're not tasting all of it as it's going to be mixed once you mix it into the bottle. So that brings up a good point. If you know you're going to freeze your milk, go ahead and pump it, and then within those 2-3 hours, go ahead and get it ready in those little freezer baggies and get it in the freezer. If you think you're going to use it today, tomorrow, and you're not sure, you can still keep it in the fridge for that 1 to 2 days. Just don't let it go all the way to the end of those 4 days and then decide to freeze it. So that's kind of the recommendation that we make. Hopefully that helps. I would say if it hasn't been 12 months, your milk is just fine to give to the baby, even though it tastes weird. So we're good. All right, so a little bit of those are great questions, because these are the questions that I think we have, and I always recommend that you bring those questions to your pediatrician because I find that many mommies have different answers. And so we want to make sure that you're doing the right things for your milk and your baby and keeping up that good breast milk production. So very good. So that is the business about pumped breast milk formula and how to heat it and how to store it. And then most of you have been told by your pediatrician that vitamin D is important. So vitamin D is important because breast milk doesn't have a lot of vitamin D. We convert to vitamin D through sunlight. So sunlight in our goes to our skin and converts to vitamin D in our skin, but we don't want you having little babies out there in the sun until 6 months of age when they can use sunscreen. So right now there's been an association of babies in too much sunlight and maybe later on having a risk for skin cancer. So right now you're shaded, cool, indoors, which means you want to fortify with vitamin D. And that's the 400 international units, the 1 drop for most of those over-the-counter preparations to give to the baby if they're exclusively breastfed. If they're exclusively formula fed, the formulas are vitamin D fortified, so nothing to worry about. If they're getting half and half, they have to get 32 ounces of formula in a day. So the majority of their feed has to be from formula to get the benefit of the vitamin D fortification in the formula. Iron and zinc are not supplements that you give your baby, but something I want you to think about, because after 6 months of age, iron and zinc are not sufficient in the breast milk or formula that the baby's getting. Their activity and their growth changes, so we do need those sources to come from the foods that they're starting, those solid foods that we're going to talk about in a second. So that being said, iron, all formulas are iron fortified. Babies have enough iron until 6 months of age, after which we recommend iron fortified foods, and we're going to talk about that. Those are the cereals, those are the meats, those are beans and greens, things like that. Why is iron important? To prevent anemia. And then we also want zinc in our diet for what? For immune function, wound healing, tissue maintenance. And so that comes in those foods too, like our fruits and vegetables. So we're going to talk about iron and zinc a little bit as we go into solid foods. But as we transition over, this is the exciting time, right? Baby is starting solids. Fun. So we start our solids at 6 months. That's our recommendation. We're going to go through a few things. Is your baby ready? What should you know? What about baby-led weaning? And what about introducing those food allergens? So is your baby ready? How do you know? They are just looking at your food all the time. You're eating, that spoon's coming to your mouth, they're chasing it with their eyes, and they start salivating, they start smacking their lips. They're interested in it. They're actually getting hungry in between their bottles, in between breastfeeding. They're maybe waking up more at night. Head and neck control. So they've developed that neuromuscular control to have control of the head and neck. Now they're getting ready for solid food introduction. They're still wobbling like that. They're not ready yet. They don't have to be sitting all on their own, although that's better if we get to baby-led weaning in a second, better for that. But they need to have at least that head and neck control. They also need to be able to swallow. So remember, initially a baby thrusts their tongue and pushes stuff out. So we want to make sure that they are able to swallow. That tongue thrust reflex tends to fade away by 4 to 5 months of age. So though we used to say 4 months of age, we know not all babies are ready. So we recommend 6 months of age for exclusive breastfeeding or formula before we add solid foods. So what do you need to know? Things to know. This does not replace breast milk. It does not replace formula. That is still the primary source of nutrition for your baby till a year of age. This is just adding in those varieties of exposures because by 8 to 9 months of age, the baby's taste buds are starting to understand the exposures that they're seeing. So this is where we start those variety of foods. We want to remember that we want all of our food to be nutrient dense. Remember, we talked about this is that time where a baby's body weight and the nutrient requirement is super high in proportion. So we want to make sure that everything is a nutrient-dense food, which means no empty calories, things like juices, things like, sweets, things like that, that can also affect the taste buds, make them want those sweet foods later on, or high-salt foods. We don't want to do that because the taste buds are starting to develop by 8 to 9 months of age, and we don't want them to want all high-salt and high-sugar foods going forward. So a variety of foods includes everything like we talked about. The meats that are going to give them the proteins, the seafood and eggs, fruits and veggies for vitamins and minerals. Beans and peas provide protein and fiber as well. And then yogurt and cheese is okay before a year of age, but no cow's milk. And the reason is because cow's milk doesn't have the correct proportion of nutrients for infants, right? So that's all kind of regulated by the human body and by the formula, but not in cow's milk. And also there is a higher protein and mineral content for cow's milk that the little kidneys can't process through quite yet. So that being said, no honey or unpasteurized foods. Honey can cause infant botulism which is really not good. You're talking to paralysis of those muscles, those nerves. So we don't introduce honey till after a year of age. Unpasteurized foods, also again, difficult to digest. No choking hazards, right? No hot dogs, nuts, raisins, popcorn, things like that. But we can introduce water. And again, this is the water that we talked about that's safe for the baby with the formula. It's not your tap water. 4 to 8 ounces of water a day. So let's talk quickly about what is better, if there is one. Traditional versus baby-led weaning. So traditional introduction, right? Traditionally, you start with a iron fortified cereal. That's what we would always say. Iron fortified cereal, maybe a rice cereal or an oatmeal. You offer a few bites once a day. You give it 3 to 5 days between each new food introduction, looking for an allergic reaction. Slowly, as the baby does better, you start mixing those ingredients. And then as they do better with chewing by 8 to 9 months of age, you advance to your stage 3 foods that have chunks and clumps. You add finger foods. And then by a year of age, they're actually looking like they're eating, minus the choking hazards, everything you guys are eating. So that's our traditional introduction of solid foods. What about baby-led weaning? So baby-led weaning is food is fun till age 1, right? It allows these children to explore by touching, squeezing, spitting, chewing, dropping all this food everywhere. It allows them to have control of the hunger and the feeling of fullness. So the thought process is am I giving the baby too much with the spoon? Am I forcing them to eat more than they want? But remember, their cues will always tell you. They'll shut their mouth, they'll turn their head, they'll spit it out if they don't want it, even in a traditional introduction setting. And then generally we think, with baby-led weaning, maybe they are going to develop that healthy relationship with food on their own. How does it work? Baby sits in the high chair, comes to dinner with you at the table. You give him a finger size amount of whatever you guys are eating that's appropriate for the baby. So whether it's a softened carrot or a squishable, piece of a vegetable, avocado, whatever it be, it's what you guys are eating that he can also have. Again, you're watching the salt and spice. They've got to be at least 6 months old to do this because they've got to have that upper body control so they're not falling over like this. What are some disadvantages that physicians worry about? They could choke if we start too early. Remember, we talked about iron fortification in those foods after 6 months of age. If the baby's not taking enough of the iron fortified foods, then we could end up with anemia. And iron fortified foods usually are cereals that come with the spoon. There are usually those meats that babies may or may not want when they're baby-led weaning. And then what if they don't eat enough? What if they're not strong enough to get enough foods in? They don't consume enough and they end up not gaining weight. And then, of course, what parents worry about, it's messy. It's just food everywhere, but this happens with food introduction in general. This is just something that if the parents wish to engage in, we can support because so the reason we're not all behind it is because we're still waiting for a lot of evidence-based research to show up. Thus far, research has shown there are no changes in if a baby becomes anemic with baby-led weaning. It is not showing us that babies aren't gaining weight with baby-led weaning. As long as parents are aware to offer those iron-rich foods, to make sure they're getting enough, to make sure they're following their milestones and meeting the curves on the growth chart, it's just about the same. So the jury's still out as far as if there's going to be one better than the other, but the reality is it looks like both methods are going to be fine as long as parents are okay with what they're doing in the process in the household. And again, like always, and this is my approach to everything, take the middle of the road. You can go either way. You can do a little bit of both. You can offer cereal and then play at a meal. That's just fine. Let's talk a little bit about allergic food introduction. So a few years ago, we shifted our paradigm, changed the way we think about things. We want you to introduce eggs and milk and soy early now because we have found that introducing those allergic foods early may actually reduce the possibility of them developing food allergies down the road. And this is most importantly about peanuts. There was a landmark study, LEAP trial in 2015, but basically what they found is introducing peanut product earlier did reduce babies from developing peanut allergy down the road. So this is done in conjunction with your pediatrician. You talk to your pediatrician, but there are some risk factors that lead you to have peanut allergy, for example, severe eczema or egg allergy. And if that's identified early, then we test these babies with the allergist as early as 4 months of age to see if they have an underlying peanut allergy. And if they don't, we introduce it as early as 4 months of age. Peanut powder or peanut butter powder mixed into some puree or oatmeal or peanut butter kind of thinned out in water or breast milk or formula just to kind of start introducing it. You do that under the guidance of your pediatrician or an allergist. And if there's no underlying food allergies or concern for, like no severe eczema, no eczema at all, and the baby tends to be doing fine, you can introduce that peanut powder or peanut butter powder as you wish into those purees. Now, no peanuts themselves, that's a choking hazard. And no peanut butter, because that's also a choking hazard. So watching for that. But 2 or 3 times a week, we can go ahead and do that. Let's talk about our toddlers. So food is now the primary source of nutrition, no longer breast milk or formula. And we want that volume of fluid to go down. Milk is still going to be a part of the scene, but no more than 16 to 20 ounces of milk in a day, mostly now eating food from a variety of sources. This is a period of slower growth. So even though we said that food, this is a period of rapid growth from 0 to 2, and food is really important, the reality is the majority of that growth happened between 0 and 1. So between 1 and 2, it's slower. So while a baby triples their birth weight by a year of age, they don't quadruple it till 2 years of age. While they've increased their height by 50% in the first year, they don't double it till 4 years of age. So the growth slows down. That's why their appetite goes down. They don't need as many of those calories. And that is also, now you combine that with a child who wants to be independent, kind of do what he wants, you have just given birth to the picky eater. That is very, very typical of toddlers. They will only eat certain things. They're going to be distracted. They want to explore still, touch, spit, chew, rub it in their hair, all of that. They often will take 10 to 15 exposures of something before they even begin to process a food. So mamas will tell me all the time, oh, he just doesn't like it. He just doesn't like it. But if he's only tried it once or twice or maybe even 3 times, there's no way he knows. He's just rejecting based upon how it looks and what it feels like. They don't like things to be mixed together. They don't like casseroles. They don't like pasta with vegetables. Everything's kind of separate. Everything is very texture-based, very appearance-based. They may eat small meals. 7 times a day they're eating meals, and 25% of their nutrition may come from snacks. Sometimes they eat a lot of fruits and they don't want vegetables, and so you're worried, are they getting enough vitamins and minerals? That's where that milk comes in. Milk is fortified, well, that whole cow's milk is fortified with vitamins and minerals for them, including that vitamin D. So that's the important thing to remember, is that it is all right for toddlers to be picky. And how we can fix that, or at least get through that period of time, is by allowing them to respond to our cues. So we want to engage them in eating. We don't want to eat on the go, which is so typical for us. We want to grab something, sit them in the car seat and get going while they're eating because they want to eat all day long. So then they associate that eating is not important, going in the car is important. And later on they'll associate eating with going in the car, and we'll end up with obesity issues. But that being said, what we want to do is let them choose how much they eat and what they eat, and you choose what's put in front of them and create an engaging time for them to eat. So meal times together, no TVs, no distractions with the iPad, no sitting in the car like we said. They are given a variety of things. You throw strawberries out there, some noodles out there, some bread out there. Today, there's strawberries, strawberries, strawberries. Next week, it's gonna be the noodles, noodles, noodles. They'll go through fads and phases, and this is completely normal for toddlers. It lasts a couple years. By 4 years of age, we're kind of moving out of it. But it requires a little bit of patience on your part, and empowering them to kind of make the right decisions. So instead of Fruit Loops, let's offer Cheerios. Instead of Fig Newtons, let's offer canned fruits that are in their own juice or in their own water. Instead of French fries, let's offer roasted vegetables. There's lots of different things we can do. And then one of those things is also, what fluids do we offer? We talked about those empty calories. Water. 4 to 8 ounces of water a day, 4 to 8, not 48, 4 to 8 ounces of water a day, a little bit more if they're burning those calories. Milk, whole milk till 2 years of age, because the baby still needs those calories from good cholesterol to help with their brain and nerve development. So that is going on, that rapid brain development is going on till 2 years of age. We need that milk, that whole milk that has good cholesterol in it. What about other milks? Oat milk, almond milk, cashew milk. They do not have the amount of calcium and vitamin D, nor do they have the amount of proteins that we need. So at this point, in the 1 to 2 year mark, only whole cow's milk or soy milk is appropriate for them, and preferably whole cow's milk. That being said, no juice, that's those empty calories, no toddler drinks, and definitely no caffeine. Dietary Guidelines for Americans. So this is something I think you should note down, but basically in 2020, December of 2020, we created not we created, they created the Dietary Guidelines for 2020 to 2025. And this they do every few years. But Chapter 2 is just on infants and toddlers. It's a lot of the stuff we talked about. It's about empowering our children to make the right choices. It's about being engaging and patient with them. And it also goes into certain details about the actual nutritional content. So how many calories, how many servings in a day, etc., that we need of certain things. One other thing that I wanted to mention real quick is fish. Just watching out what kind of fish we offer, because some fish have a lot more mercury in them. Cod, sea bass, tuna, those are ones that have a lot of mercury. So if babies are eating fish a lot, you want to go more towards salmon, tilapia, shrimp. Those are better. I'll welcome your questions. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you guys. If I can answer questions, I'd love to. All right. Well, I guess that was more than enough, or if you have any questions, would love to hear them down the road. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Have a good evening.